Okay, so I think we will start. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I am very happy to announce this lecture by our colleague Kostis Stafylakis from Athens, Greece. Kostis is a visual artist, art theorist, and curator. He has been the artistic director of Viz Laboratory for Visual Culture in Athens and currently teaches at the Future Art Education program by Lab 12 and ASFA, and the postgraduate program of the Department of Fine Arts and Applied Arts at University of Western Macedonia. So the topic of Kostis' lecture today is titled Artistic Mimicry and Post-Digital Peripheries, the Case of Athens. I want to say that I'm very happy that we have Kostis to discuss these topics, because for Digital Society Laboratory, which is hosting this event, the topic and idea and just diving deeper into this question of post-digital, of this society where the online and offline world are more and more entangled than ever, is a very important point for us. We are especially happy to present a topic which is for the wider institute. Our laboratory is part of something that we rarely see, and this is a topic of contemporary art, because contemporary art has truly a lot to say and a lot to contribute to the questions of society, of social engagement. So in this sense, I am very happy to be introducing this. Kostis is I can say, a very interesting speaker, but one of specific areas of his research is mimetics, something which is becoming more and more important in studies of contemporary art. And what we'll be hearing about today from him is going to, in general terms, deal with internet aesthetics and this so-called post-internet art. And before giving the floor to Kostis, I just want to read a sentence from this announcement of this lecture. So Kostis, talking about the time around Donald Trump's accession to the presidency, says, art's absorption of online reality, alongside its occasional accelerationist ethos of embracing online alienation, was soon seen as a stigma against art's very own mimetic habitus. Kostis, you have the floor. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you, Vera. Can everybody listen to me? Is the sound okay? Fantastic. Okay, so I'm deeply honored by this invitation and opportunity to address the Institute of Philosophy and Social Theory at the University of Belgrade. This is the consequences of meeting Vera Mevora some time in the recent past. And finding out that we actually share so many common interests, especially on internet culture and the adventures of online forms of subversion, the prospects and pitfalls of online subversion. I know that this is a topic that Vera is thoroughly studying, and we have engaged in a kind of beautiful dialogue, which I really aspire to and enjoy. So I'm deeply happy to share these thoughts with you today. Let me start sharing my screen, and I hope everything will be easier. Okay, so I guess everyone can look at the PowerPoint now. So the title is Artistic Mimicry in Post-Digital Peripheries, the Case of Athens. I've chosen this title because I wish to tackle a number of issues pertinent to how artistic strategies react to the advent of the post-digital mediascape in the European periphery, while also reflecting on how the cultural centers of Europe engage with the experience of that very periphery. And I will be mentioning a number of artistic examples that rose in Greece since 2009, since the start of what you may know as a deep financial crisis, which was also a turning point towards a media sphere, a social life, and an aesthetic self that becomes post-digital, that is growingly impacted, affected by social media, by smart technologies, by the technologies of the digital self. And I'm really, really curious to listen to Belgrade's experience to see if this resonates with you in certain ways. So to clarify the terms I'll be using, I mean, not everyone has to be acquainted with those terms, although I'm sure that lots of people are pretty aware of what I'm mentioning. The post-internet is a shift in contemporary art taking place around 2008, 2009, when various artists started thinking that their work is less about the internet as a medium and more about the Web 2, about how the Web 2 has affected identities, desires, social relations, and so on. So you may think of works such as Marisa Olsen's blog, reporting the process of her admission to the auditions of American Idol, or even John Ruffman's immersion into fringe subcultural footage consumed by beta males, so-called beta males on channels such as, on forums such as 4chan, and so on. The post-internet is a contested umbrella term for practices that are internet aware. Similarly, the post-digital is a broader term, burgeoning in the second decade of the century, to refer to how the interplay between cyberspace and real space produces all kinds of interrelations and connections and experiences. Vera offered a very nice introduction to the notion. Now, although there's been an intense international interest on art produced in Greece in between 2009 and 2020, the post-digital and the post-internet aspect of locally produced art has been kept unaddressed, silenced, even avoided as a topic. The international focus on the recent art of this troublesome Balkan country depicts the place as a pre-digital territory, denying both its digital and post-digital life. And when some of us, well, lots of us, started to apply the term post-internet to things we were doing, we were told by critics in Berlin and London and New York that we shouldn't do so, because post-internet art is now complicit with the reactionary aesthetics of the alt-right, and we should revert to our own pre-digital versions of ourselves. I'll hereby try to account for the Greek post-digital. The Greek post-digital is a term I coined in some of my recent writings and presentations to assess the advent of post-digitality in Greece. It does not wish to suggest any cultural or ethnic idiom. On the contrary, it merely outlines the particularities of the proliferation of user-friendly digital platforms in late zeros Greece around 2008 to 2009. My use of the term refers to the particular way in which the wild proliferation of digital platforms coincided with an unprecedented, the unprecedented consequences of the financial crisis, namely the vast dislocation of social identities, political ideologies, traditional social networks, and labor spaces. This pas de deux between social collapse and vast digitization is what I call the Greek post-digital, the experience of a nuclear reactor. So my interest in post-digitality stemmed from my focus and experimentation with both online and offline mimicry, semblance, simulation, mimesis as a crucial aspect of entangled artistic praxis in environments undergoing the geological pressure of crisis. For example, some of my early writings on the topic around 2010 and 2011 try to reconfigure this notion of subversive affirmation or over-identification to make it applicable in the context of Greek experience and social life in the 2010s, the periods of crisis. So the essence of my argument was that in the context of the Greek experience, we should think of mimetic strategies such as over-identification less as an avant-gardist strategy of subversion and more as a symptomal reaction, as fragile embeddedness in social experience, a state that does not pose any neat and unproblematic choices between conformity and subversiveness. So my influences were, of course, examples such as the Laibach, the Slovene group, the Neue-Slowenische Kunst, the so-called NSK, the Western tactical media, and early zeros artistic activism, and so on. But at the same time, I wish to account for experimentations taking place in early Greek social media sphere, examples that were not rooted in the arts or art activism. And such an early example was the case around Elder Pastitios, a 2012 trollish Greek Facebook stunt that sought to interact with popular conspiracy theories, religious fanaticism, and indulgence in national victimization. The page offered a subversive mimicry of the influence that the preaching of a specific monk, Elder Paisios, exerted on Greek society at the time. The myth around Paisios, Elder Paisios, spoke of the miracles he's performed while his preaching prophetized a third war in which a blonde race, the Russians, would fight against Turkey, defeat Turkey, and deliver Istanbul to the Greeks. This didn't go as expected, obviously. The FB page was a creation by the young Philippos Loizos and was tasked to inform the monk's followers about the miracles that the monk keeps performing after his death in 1994. But as you can clearly see, Elder Paisios has been mutated into Elder Pastitios, the Pastafarian, evoking pasticcio, the popular Greek recipe, and which is a pastis made of pasta, mince, and bechamel cream, and the American Church of Pastafarianism. In one of the page's posts, the author forged the testimony of an anonymous priest describing an unknown miracle performed by Elder Paisios, in which the deceased elder brought back to life a young drugs addict who had a terrible accident with his motorbike. This fake post, this fake narration, was reposted by various religious outlets, finding its way to the cover of a popular far-right newspaper. The FB page was brought to the attention of a parliament member of the Golden Dome, the Greek neo-Nazi party, who raised the issue in the Greek parliament. The attorney arrested Philippos Loizos, the creator of the page, on accusations of blasphemy. The arrest of the creator of Elder Pastitios, the attempt to censor him, triggered something known as the Streisand effect. The Greek web was suddenly overtaken by profiles, pages, blogs, and YouTube channels adopting all possible adaptations of Pastitios' name. Elder Parisios, Elder Hasisius, Elder Maiprisius, Elder Servicius, and other ridiculous monks. The virality of Pastitios inspired a group of journalists of the left-wing newspaper Avis, who decided to organize a public litany for Pastichios, and the orbit of the Holy Corpse of Geron Pastichios was a public performance featuring the journalists dressed up in as Orthodox priests, and lots of Pastichios symbolizing the body of the dead elder. This prankis, absurdist event is, I think, a clear marker that Greece had entered the post-digital era, manifesting itself in the way online mimicry can have ripple effects with legal, political, and personal consequences and materializations. So amidst the wild proliferation of and polarization of the early crisis years, this event also pointed to an accelerated relationality by which the most unexpected reactions may occur anytime. In 2010 background Greece, two particular ideas swipe the entire social body. Two particular ideologies try to hegemonize society. On the one hand, you may find the neoliberal, let's say, narration suggesting that crisis is some sort of a remedy, some sort of an opportunity for Greek economy and society to rationalize its institutions and practices and reshape itself and so on. And on the other hand, you may notice this radicalist narration suggesting that Greece should heroically exit the EU zone and restructure its economy to become insular and self-sufficient. And notice that this ideological divide transcended all traditional political divides and identities, left and right, for example, or progressive or regressive, expressing itself in a variety of syncretic ways. It is under these geological pressures that neat position and choices begin to look privileged, if not superficial. And this is the reason why some of the analysis by authors such as Alexei Yurtsak on the use of artistic mimicry in late socialist and late capitalist regimes seemed relevant and portable enough to explain how art can respond under such overwhelming pressures. As Alexei Yurtsak suggests, describing practices of over-identification, when people are confronted with rampant and cynical dilemmas, they develop some kind of mimetic response to the forces affecting them. Responses that can't be classified as sincere affirmation of the status quo, subtle ridicule of the status quo, or the mixture of the two. This is why I tend to think some of the mimicries I will present today as ways of navigation, as visceral and symptomal responses rather than ingenuously subversive. This was as well my response to confusing phenomena that would pop out at the time. Since 2006, I'm part of an artistic duet with artist Vana Kostagiola. Our name is Cavex. And around 2009, we had spotted the online blogs of emerging fringe Athenian radicals that were self-identifying as autonomous nationalists, Strasserites, or third positionists, as we may call them, this particular variation of post-war neo-fascism, basically. The study of these blocks and these groups prompted us to start the Black Circle project, which was a weird and alerting mimicry of such a group called the Black Lily. With no concrete idea about the post-digital or the post-internet and what it meant as a term, and with influences from the tactical media and subversive affirmation, we were transforming this online material that we were finding into fierce performances in which we appeared as members of the Black Circle, a mimicry of such a group, delivering speeches to cultural audiences to alert them about this confusing ideological trend they were completely unaware of by the time. And by this time, artistic spaces tried to host all kinds of political and activist organizations. So as part of the audience, there was certainly some part of the audience that would think that we are real, that the Black Circle is an actual and existing fringe group such as this, though our presence was entirely puzzling. And the times were puzzling as well. Summer 2011 was marked by the occupation of Syntagma Square, Central Square of Athens, by the movement of Aganaktismeni, the Greek version of the Indignados movement. I was then invited to curate my first professional group show at the Symptom Project platform, which is a platform and organization that organizes shows in the city of Amphissa, central Greece. The name I chose for the show was To the Limits of Togetherness, since I invited an ideologically diverse group of artists to reflect on how the aura of collectivity and community had affected their life and work. Here's another view of the show. Two particular works from that show testify for the emergence of a traumatic post-digitality, which makes me think that the Greek post-digital is traumatic, traumatized, and dramatizing occasionally. So the first example is a series of heavy leather-mounted books by artist Vasilis Vlastaras called Symptoms. During the early blogosphere period, Vlastaras had operated as an online archivist, a collector of web oddities, obsessively collecting political commentary in the form of posts, comments, replies to comments, and so on. These lengthy online texts were documents of early online hate speech, of the stigmatizing operation of language in this kind of new online economy of political argumentation. The bottom line of most discussions would be something like the viral Greek word sophos, which is like, I wish you a rotting death. Artist Vasilis Vlastaras prints these discussions in these heavy books, in these heavy volumes, replacing their vector with a materiality that renders them monumental, testimonial, in a sense. He presents the work in the form of an installation with a shelf that allows the visitor to revisit this linguistic segment of recent social history. Now, the second example of this traumatic post-digitality is a work that mimics the stigmatizing and anathematic style of this era. It reenacts hatred in the form of a collective ritual. Artist Pokayo, which is a nickname for Polydoros Karyophilis, staged Yogurt Revolution, an execution-style performance on the central square of the city of Amphissa, where artists exhibiting the show and the curator, obviously, were invited to be yogurted by the local audience and passersby. Well, as you may see, that's me on the right corner, receiving most of the yogurt for obvious reasons. It felt almost cathartic, but it was also upsetting to see passersby throwing the case as well, risking to inflict some serious damage. In posterity, I would suggest that these works reflect on the dank side and quality of language and image, the dead, segmented, naturalized energy of hate and dehumanization in online hate speech. These works are ominous forecasts of what we now call lol nihilism, and also delve into the esoteric aspects of memes to render them open, susceptible to further options and transmutations. In 2013, I was invited to join the curatorial collective that curated Agora, the fourth Athens Biennale, hosted at the former stock market of Athens. The show featured a public program of weird actions, concerts, plays, and workshops taking place in the auditorium situated in the main hall of the former stock market of Athens. Elevated in the space of Agora, you'll spot out this electronic board displaying the movement of stocks on the day the stock market stopped operating. This board is now a work of art and belongs to a Greek artist, George Harvalias. In the framework of my curating, I had a chance to invite Fita, a conceptual art duet stemming out of the emerging local queer scene. And in turn, the queer friends of Fita populated the space of Agora, the space of the Biennale, proceeding to scripted and improvised performances. Okay, this is an installation and an interactive work called 100 Worst Greeks, and it's an attempt to collect portraits of the most malevolent Greek persons of all times. Plato is in, and Aristotle is also in there as well. So a performance I always recall as fundamental to this traumatic post-digitality is Daddy Knows, a performance by Alex Dimitriou, or Meta Theodosia, a non-binary activist going by many names. In Daddy Knows, Alex presents a Skype call with her father, where her father is actually trying to indoctrinate his daughter with nationalistic conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic innuendos, homophobic ideas, dissing the political elites and asking his daughter to follow the right path. Alex responds to her father's words with frustration, exhaustion, and forced capitulation. By the end of the talk, the audience realizes that the parts with the father's voice are recorded excerpts from an actual discussion between Alex and her father, and that Alex is merely responding to this pre-recorded material again and again. Trapped in a ritual of dramatic repetition, struggling to reckon how things simply are, Alex is exposing her father, doxing her father to the random audience of the show. In this rather dystopian moment, Alex experienced online communication as a suppressive bubble rather than unhinged openness. But also, Alex employs physical space to communicate the trauma, to share the impasse with a certain community of spectators. By the time of Agora, the fourth Athens Biennale, the international art field was on us. Athens was under the spotlight of curators, institutions, authors, activists, and so on. The story of Greek crisis and the struggle of local cultural initiatives to remain resilient was a theme to explore all around the globe. Soon after the fourth Athens Biennale, Documenta, this very important periodical German show from Kassel, Germany, announced that its 14th iteration would take place in both Athens and Kassel under the main theme, Learning from Athens. Many, including myself, felt that the curators of Documenta offered a public program and a show that fetishized Greece as a non-conforming Southern body that resists the neoliberal lifestyle through music and dance. The show offered a mix of haptic and sonar experiences, disregarding the entire online experience, the digital culture restructuring our everyday life. To examine the consequences of this Orientalist depiction of Greece, the Athens Biennale decided to organize an independent program that would run parallel, synchronously to the opening of the Documenta 14 in Athens. And various artists and curators were summoned to form the Heart and Sword division, a curatorial band responsible for this urgent spin exhibition of the Biennale, titled Waiting for the Barbarians, a mimetic reworking of Documenta's leitmotif of indigenous resistance against neoliberalism. The program kicked off with the circulation of photos depicting the curators in black, resembling 19th century Mediterranean pirates, spiced up with tech and leather accessories. The photo shoot took place on the rooftop of both the Biennales and the Documenta's headquarters in Athens, as they shared the same building back then. In Waiting for the Barbarians, curators and artists would impersonate the barbarians, the noble savages, the imperiled, insurgent, and romanticized indigeneities of an imaginary global South. These acts were meant to show that we, so-called Southerners, are not necessarily good, any good. In this quite niche press conference of the Biennale, the team of curators role-played the barbarians, improvising on themes of authenticity, anti-capitalism, digital alienation, return to origins, mimicking the discourse of Documenta, and so on. The act was obviously an homage to Laibach, and especially to the infamous 1983 TV Technic interview, in which Laibach tests the reflexes of the state and the police. A project called The Koumena, hosted at this urgent Biennale, had already unleashed an online trolling of Documenta's discourse by mimifying some key terms used by the curators of Documenta. In one of the memes produced by the Koumena, it sounds similar. It echoes Documenta. It sounds similar to Documenta. The word freedom is split between the north and the south, and from the north you get Braveheart and Mel Gibson, and from the south you get Eleftheria, Greek word for freedom, with a picture of Eleftheria Arvanitaki, a contemporary Greek folk singer. In a similar fashion, the Biennale presented the Klassenfahrt project, an educational trip by a multinational team of artists. As Documenta 14 had summoned cultural travelers from all around the globe, the proxy travel agency Blue Owl Travels advertised online an alternative guided tour. A bus by Blue Owl Travels, a fictitious agency, kidnapped the visitors of Documenta 14 and drove them to a rural outskirt of Athens to encounter a small village inhabited by exotic indigeneities, such as Mexican Satanists, Balkan Indians, art teachers, black magicians, pink gorillas, and tennis coaches. Revisiting the primitivist legacy, Klassenfahrt sought to revamp a boring suburb of Athens, of Attica, into a post-apocalyptic Pont Aven. These practices were not merely attempts to criticize Orientalism, they were also techniques of entanglement, ways to embrace what is being projected on you and play with it, and assume it in some sense. These were mimetic reworkings of prominent fantasies, but they were also mimetic operations, since they tried to produce weird, dank, and captivating visual material that would circulate on social media, irritating a good number of recipients. I think it was then, in this community of cultural practitioners and producers, that the term post-internet started to resonate in a slightly different manner from its pejorative use. The Athenian landscape of mid-2010s experienced the blooming of all kinds of artist-run spaces and DIY artistic practice that had already adopted the term post-internet to refer to how the web and digitization had affected the materiality and narrative tools in their work. Groups such as the kernel, for example, and artists, individual artists like Valinia Svoronu, had already developed a skilled post-internet and post-digital aesthetic, good enough to address planetary issues, ecology, material culture, and so on. And although the Athenian art scene was already messing with a post-internet new materialism, the examples I'm showcasing today developed perhaps an alternate, more conflictual idea of the post-internet. Author and curator Nadia Argyropoulou has described them as anywise, otherwise, and fugitive. I will simply add that they are still interested in what Adorno referred to as the mimesis of the hardened and the alienated. But the most spectacular and traumatic crux regarding the uses of the post-internet in our small post-digital periphery was yet to come. By early 2018, the Athens Biennale had secured the resources to proceed to a large international exhibition. And the result was Anti, the sixth Athens Biennale, curated by Stephanie Hessler, Pocayo, and myself. Anti sought to map the ways in which confrontation, opposition was being mainstreamed in politics, ideology, and culture industry at the time, a couple of years after Trump's ascent to power. The show would focus on the figure of the contrarian in digital culture, popular culture, Netflix series, the music industry, and in politics, also drawing on the local experience of generalized polarization. Hosting more than 100 artists and collectives from all across the globe, actually, the Biennale employed both earnest and mimetic strategies to examine the burgeoning of anti, showcasing a variety of post-internet approaches and aesthetics. Here's a first feel of the show. This is an immersive work in the form of a zine by the agency. Another view, the agency again. This is a work by Cora Krita, Arunan Hai, and Alex Fogis, and another view of the same work. I'll try to sum up the international reception of the Biennale. The biggest parts of the art press heralded the Biennale's sensorial galore as a successful dystopian critique of the digital swamp. David Batty, for example, on The Guardian. Others criticized the show for toying with dangerous edginess. The Biennale's will to animate a genealogy of unsettling mimesis was perceived by some forums, such as hyperallergic, for example, as dangerous mystification of the present. One, of course, may reply, well, let us choose our own level of entanglement with things, but there is a deeper problem with this patronizing style of hyperallergic. This alert to the danger in such mimetic operations was the repercussion of an ongoing debate about the so-called docility of post-internet art in technological determinism and the reactionary politics of Silicon Valley. Critics like Larne Abzeg-Bogarty, for example, emphatically spoke of the wholeness of post-internet aesthetics as an overarching element revealing itself in the flatness of its materiality and social apathy. Cultural critics such as Ana Teixeira Pinto discovered the same libidinal investment between neo-reactionary cyber utopianism and the digital form of representation in post-internet art. In a 2018 colloquium organized by BAC Utrecht, a few months prior to the Athens Biennale, this critique of the post-internet escalated into a diffused dread with mimesis. In a reply to a question by a member of the audience at the BAC conference, critic Ana Teixeira Pinto suggested that, quote, if you try to mimic the strategies of the alt-right, you will become the alt-right, end of quote. Well, not for the first time in Western intellectual history, mimesis is stigmatized via association with social danger. It is consequential that the syntax of Ana Teixeira Pinto's statement is identical to health disclaimers on cigarette packets. Like, if you do this, this will happen to you. So absolutely deterministic in some way indeed. In my view, both interpretations of the Biennale, dystopian critique versus dangerous mimicry, are equally problematic since they pose a false dilemma. The shortcoming of these critiques is manifest, or approaches, is manifest in how certain metropolitan scenes, cultural scenes, fear to lose control over the definition of things in the age of post-truth politics and online ambiguity. The strategies I presented in the first half of this presentation, as well as the strategies of the 6th Athens Biennale that I will roughly recall, were neither derogatory nor affirmative, because they could never deal with such a dilemma or frame things in this way. The show was housed at the former TTT, an eclectic remnant that once housed the pre-war company of posts, telegraphs, and telephony, and also a main city outlet for the Hellenic Telecommunications Organization up until 2015, a service responsible for the digitization of Greek society and life and economy. The additional venue of the Biennale was an abandoned old-fashioned Athenian hotel, Hotel Esperia, which sat, I'm going to show that in a while. The hotel sat its doors in 2009, faced with social unrest and economic downfall. These urban husks testify for this weird dependency between financial recession and digital acceleration that I call the Greek post-digital. The exhibition at TTT was curated to be felt as a psychedelic drive in recent digital culture, while the installation at the Esperia Hotel felt like an outlandish colloquium of weird groups, a symposium of fringe organizations. The original structure of cubicle offices at the main building was kept to house projects such as Civil Financial Regulation Office by the PENK collective. The German activist collective had hired 6 persons to work in this DIY call center, calling up technocrats and representatives of financial, regulatory, and policy-making bodies in Europe, such as the European Central Bank. The visitor was ambushed by a taxidermic animal popping through the office's ceiling, the ceiling cat by Eva and Franco Mattes, originally a viral meme now fleshed out to patrol the space. The same floor hosted the Seasteaders by Daniel Keller and Jacob Hurwitz Goodman, a documentary on Silicon Valley libertarians negotiating to develop an archipelago of libertarian aquatic micronations at Tahiti. A wooden corridor led to a shrine hosting Marisa Olson's Well Guru, in which Marisa Olson impersonates an online wellness guru offering an ASMR session to discharge you from the maladies of internet life. Johannes Paul Rater performed his swarming, raiding the touristic areas of Athens, upsetting the organized flow of tourism and archaeological spaces. The situation at Esperia Hotel, and here's the entrance of this second venue, the Esperia Hotel, was equally endotic and eerie. A large hall was converted into a boxing arena to host chess boxing lessons and matches by Jeppe Rupping. Another lounge on the floor was occupied by the German anti-nationalist satirical organization of the Front Deutscher Apfel, an anti-fascist group which since 2004 employs unsettling mimicry in the form of counter demonstrations that disrupt the advance of neo-Nazis and far-right parties in Leipzig, Saxony. And pushing through the back door of the Front's lair, you would discover yet another hideaway, yet another odd community, a weird tribal groupuscule impersonating a modern cargo cult, a work by Greek artist Panos Sklavenitis. This ragtag cult of painted freaks raided the halls of the Biennale and the avenue in front of the hotel, delivering ritualistic choreographies and screams. The scene was an unsettling reworking of the opening ceremony of the Athens 2004 Olympic Games. I think that the fear of this blend of mimicry and reality expressed by forums such as Hyperallergic, for example, and other similar critiques, is rather similar to the contemporary fear of memes and the mimetic. These critical elites, represented by Hyperallergic, appear to be worried about how aesthetic mimesis can produce susceptibility to entire ideological regimes. In this, I think they mistake both the generative force of mimesis and its effects, falling for the very omnipotence of meme magic they wish to bring down. Memes did not obviously bring Trump to power. The vote of the American Rust Belt brought Trump to power. To suggest the former is to buy in the myth of the trolls. I think that this critique of post-internet art as dangerous due to its mimetic immersion in cyberculture is somehow reducing mimesis to mere contagion. In opposition to this simplification, I think we have to revisit a basic psychoanalytic insight offered by Lacanian psychoanalysis. Mimesis, semblance, mimicry is that which conditions language and the production of truth eventually. The mimetic is an interstice, a differentiating factor able to produce digression, diversion, but a kind of diversion that which reminds us why a picture or a feel indulges us in the first place and hinges us with it. Similarly, memes are not evolutionary machines. I have no interest in the theory of, the evolutionary theory of memes and stuff like that. I'm not particularly happy with this kind of evolutionary understanding and idea behind the notion of the meme. But as philosopher Ian Parker suggests, memes are unconscious responses in digital space. If something is thought of, visualized, but repressed, it immediately becomes part of the material of the meme, of its potential material. In an almost hidden room at the Esperia Hotel, the visitor would encounter the Decent Dawn comic strips, in which J.P. Donner subverts the miasmatic side of Donald Trump, transforming him into a next-door guy, a social benefactor that carries out random benevolent acts. These depictions of Donald Trump are firstly things someone thought of and said, no, this can't be done. That's not right. Giacomo Biancino rightly notices that there is a jouissance, a pleasure produced by memes that is the product of the confusion of the uninitiated viewer. The idea that we can unsee a meme, that we can avoid or negate what we saw, is simply a product of the meme, a supplement of the meme, Biancino will argue. Similarly, as to the mimetic, you don't choose to mimic something. You're already inscribed in semblances. Alexei Yurchak calls this the performative priority of the world. And this is why I so often find myself at odds with some philosophical trends that seem to deal with sincerity, semblance, insincerity, and irony, such as the school of metamodernism, for example. Various metamodernist thinkers and artists have developed this idea that we should supersede postmodern irony by developing a sincere insincerity, an affectionate irony that can undo postmodern nihilism. I think the answer is no. You don't get to choose to be insincere. That's a very privileged way to think about it. Mimicry is symptomal. It is that which withholds your own truth. And if there is a lesson from these post-internet controversies in our small post-digital periphery, then this is that you don't get to choose to mimic reality. Mimicry chooses you in a way. By acknowledging this imbrication, you may come up with new uses of mimicry. No one really knows. And that's all. Thank you for your patience. And I'm really curious to listen to your ideas and reflections on what I present. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kostis. That was really great. Just let me do something, just a second. Yeah. So I removed the pin from you just to have everybody here. So I have actually several things I want to discuss with you, but I will give a chance to our small but definitely interesting audience if somebody would like to comment or ask Kostis a question. Okay, so me then. I'm very happy to have the floor. I mean, I have several things I want us to go through, and maybe because you ended up talking about meme culture, I would start with that. I mean, I first encountered actually this topic in my research recently, and I know I wasn't such a strong meme user. But what you said just now, it's very interesting. Like this kind of, did I avoid them, or did I not use memes actively, or did I really avoid them? So no, I mean, of course I knew about memes, but I did not take them seriously. And through my own research, I really did discover that these are very important social phenomena. In digital space, you illustrated how in this post-digital context they flow over and not only stay in this digital reality. So I wanted to ask you about that, about the meme culture and in your perspective on its importance or place in this digital ecology or post-digital ecology, maybe also in terms of what you said said, which was very interesting for me, that virality itself, reality, which is actually a digital phenomenon, contributed or caused this spilling over. So actually made the post-digital that we are in. So that maybe, yeah.
Okay. Should anyone else add something to that, or should I just go on improvising with things in my mind?
Yeah, I mean, go on. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, indeed. I mean, we obviously have the privilege, in certain cases, to be emancipated from meme cultures, in the sense to find a way to keep a critical distance from what we see, because we probably belong to a certain particle of the audience, which is already emancipated. The question I'm addressing today is what happens when you're developing an art strategy or an art practice that wants to address a wider audience that is inflicted by the styles and the language of memes, and also by the memes of the alt-right, of the reactionary manosphere that has prevailed and that has sort of made its kind of presence strong in the recent years. And the way I go about it, which is not a proposal or a suggestion. I mean, I'm not really willing to suggest anything, to tell anyone what to do, on such subject matters, is that if you want to develop an artistic practice that engages with this docile audiences, then you have to seriously consider how alt-right aesthetics and how reactionary aesthetics online affect and produce indulgence, and how this, what type of material is that sort of affects people, and you have to find a way to make it part of the material you use as an artist. Otherwise, you're simply preaching to the converted, which is okay to do, but then then you're simply addressing the audience that is already averted by the alt-right, that is already somehow uninspired or critically opposed to the alt-right. Then then it's not a big deal. On the other hand, the practices that I presented are not conscious memifications, are not 100% conscious mimicries, but they are products, as I try to show, of a certain entanglement, of a certain embeddedness in a visual field where neat positions and choices are not available. The idea of a panoptic position wherein we can critically detach ourselves from the entire operation of memes and the mimetic is a privileged position. This is the position of highly privileged intellectual persons that we have to scrutinize in a way. And this is perhaps the main point I wish to make by presenting you with all this kind of weird happenings that took place in between 2010 and contemporary Greece. So this is the framework I sort of wish to offer, and am here to try to explain, analyzing everything further if.
Thanks, Kostis. Maybe I would just add another question, just in terms of your studies, which is much wider, of mimetics and that connection with meme culture. Like, how would you explain that? I mean, I know it's complicated and also related to what you talked about in your answer to the first question, but if you have maybe some additional insight on that connection.
So yeah, I mean, one of the one of the elements of memes and memetics and the meme culture is that they provide some kind of pleasure to their authors, but also to a certain community that embraces them by alienating the viewer, the random spectator, by creating a content that is not immediately absorbed or understood or deciphered by the random viewer. And this is an aspect of the pleasure that memes generate. And so this dimension of memetics and memes in contemporary digital or online culture brought me to think of kind of a relation between the online mime, the producer of mimetic operations and memes and products and aesthetic objects online, with a topic of cultural studies and kind of an old and forgotten topic in cultural history, which is like the story of Momus, which is an ancient god of insincerity, unfair criticism and judgment, and mockery, and irony. And it's a figure that is met in like in Aesop, and then in the Renaissance, and then in the years of religious transformation, and then back again in modernity, in an early literary criticism, modern literary criticism, the figure of the Momus and the topos of the Momus as of the ancient god of Momus as some kind of divine agnostic figure that indulges in criticizing and exerting unfair criticism against divine creations. And I think that by sort of researching on the topic, I think that I've discovered that the literary figure of the mime in literature and Western culture, and not only in Western, it is a transcultural kind of topos, somehow is related and interconnected in a historical dialectic to the figure of the Momus. So there is a relationship between the mime and the Momus, and when the mime appears, well, he was always a bit of a Momus. He was always a bit of a prankster. He was always a bit of a kind of subversive and yet self-destructive model or paradigm. So I have coined, and I like to coin various terms. So I've coined this term, mometics, to perhaps outline this interest and this kind of ongoing research on this dialectical relation between the mime and the Momus, which perhaps delivers a wider kind of perspective to discuss about mimicry, memes, and the mimetic, and both terms of cultural history and our kind of very ominous and very estranging present. This is the second point I wish to offer to this discussion.
Great, thank you. I mean, it's also very useful for me for thinking, because as you said, it's impossible to study meme culture or participate in meme culture and to avoid this kind of reactionary or very negative, analytically perceived neo-fascist imagery. So like we actually do need to develop new tools to understand, because this is not, as I said, just some fringe group doing it. It's like it's a massive popular culture on the internet overflowing. Thanks. So if does somebody else want to join in?
But Vera, I know that you are studying phenomena and positions and takes such as the post-Pepe manifesto and this idea of reappropriating the means of production that has been discussed in recent forums and things. So I would also like to sort of engage with, sort of listen to your opinion on this and know whether you.
I was recently in the radio show, and I told to the woman who is the editor, like she was really a great expert at the topic. She called me to talk. Said like. I don't want to talk. I want to ask you questions. So okay. we should keep it. Keep that limited. I mean, I agree. I mean, this is a work in progress. I do believe that we are at some point a conundrum, at some conundrum regarding this mimetic culture. So what interested me in this sense was actually the question of irony. You spoke about this a little bit. So for me, that I see some kind of development, some kind of change in use of ironies. I think that maybe we're just actually addressing the same issue, but just approaching from different. So hopefully, hopefully we will discuss opinions and people will be able to read and hear about this more. So because I don't see anybody raising hands, I want then to ask you another question and to end with that. And this is related to the question of post-internet art. So I want to, here I will insert my position at the start. So with my colleague who is actually here, Yana Guga, we are writing a paper, which actually really critical about the position, I mean, the aesthetics and idea of post-internet art. From what perspective? I mean, we can't deny that it's there. It's not something I can choose as memes to just like, no, I don't like this, it doesn't exist. But what bothered us or inspired us to think about or critically about post-internet art is that we know about the experiences of early net arts movement. So we know about the history of art which uses technology or dwells into the technology on a deeper level, which is not this cultural social level. So and our position is like, are we just moving too fast over too fast through the possibilities that art can actually internet art or the digital art, which is in the medium, which is from the medium, not just watching it from some social eye. Are we just giving up on those potentialities, and is it dangerous to give up on them from artistic perspective?
Okay, well, I'm not sure whether we should turn this into a terminological dilemma or question, but certainly there's a great variety of examples from what can be addressed as post-internet art that still continue to deal and delve into the actual technological dimension of contemporary digital society and find ways to intervene and divert and to somehow find new ways to process contemporary algorithmic machines and stuff. So I don't think that there is a very clear. I don't think that the post-internet betrays the technological edge or the kind of the subversive element in early net art. It brings along another level of awareness. Which is factual. It's basically what certain artists like Marisa Olsen, who is often credited with inventing the term, can offer to the discussion. And there's certain awareness that the net and the web, as we move from Web 2 to Web 3, is not the kind of utopian concept that we we used to think of and we used to share back in the mid and late 90s and even the early zeros, that it has been usurped by very particular financial and capitalist forces that imbricate the net with specific ideologies, with priorities and specific and that's like filtering basically the circulation of things. And it may sound more dystopian, but and perhaps this kind of dystopian feeling is also imprinted in the aesthetics of the post-internet. Perhaps we witness the post-internet developing into something more happy and a hopeful version of itself in the present time or in the future. But at the same time, I'm afraid that the concept of hope and of reinventing humanity through digital technologies is also a kind of aristocratic, wishful way to depict the actual relation between, bodies and minds and technology and stuff like that. Because the problem is that when you avoid this kind of grimdark version of the web discovered and played with by post-internet artists like John Ruffman, for example, or Ed Fornieles, or some of the big names of the post-internet, then you can easily end up with a hope punk version of digital culture and digital reality that also in a reactionary manner and in a reactionary fashion discover something humane and almost a sense of middle-aged rivalry in web culture, and depicts humanity as perennial and survivalist, and then we would certainly have to scrutinize that tension if this takes the upper hand and this begins to stand for post-internet aesthetics and post-internet art. We should pay attention, I think, to this shift as well, if it happens. That's my thought on this.
Thank you, Kostis, so much for giving this lecture, for engaging in this conversation with me. Thank you for everybody who were with us on Zoom today, and this lecture will be available on our website for future references and future thinkers who won't be able to discuss with us, but maybe comments and such. So Kostis, again, thank you so much. And hopefully we will meet soon.
Thanks a lot. That was a pleasure. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.